The first test was supposed to save our marriage. That's the part that still makes me laugh sometimes. Not a happy laugh, more like the kind that slips out when your brain finally realizes the universe has a sick sense of humor. My husband and I had been trying for a baby for almost 3 years when the fertility specialist suggested comprehensive testing. Just to rule things out, she said gently. Rule things out. God. I remember sitting there beside Trevor in that cold medical office in downtown Seattle while rain streaked across the windows and couples pretended not to look at each other in the waiting room. Infertility clinics are strange places. Too quiet, too polite. Every woman there looks emotionally exhausted but carefully moisturized. Every man stares at his phone like avoiding eye contact might reduce the shame somehow. Trevor squeezed my hand while the doctor explained hormone panels and sperm analysis and treatment options. He looked supportive, concerned, loving. That was the problem with Trevor. He always looked like the perfect husband. Tall, calm, financially successful, emotionally composed in public. The kind of man strangers trusted immediately. The kind of man women envied you for marrying. Meanwhile, behind closed doors, our marriage had slowly become a museum of unspoken things. Not abusive, not explosive, just lonely in ways that are harder to explain. We stopped touching naturally somewhere around year 6. Sex became scheduled around ovulation windows and disappointment. Conversations became logistical. Bills, groceries, work trips, family obligations. Some couples collapse dramatically. Others die inch by inch while smiling at dinner parties. I was 34 then, Trevor was 38, and both of us acted like having a baby would somehow resurrect whatever we lost. People do that all the time. They mistake children for emotional CPR. 3 weeks later, the doctor called me directly with the results. That should have been my first warning sign. Your tests look normal, she said carefully. Relief hit instantly. Then she continued, but there's an issue with Trevor's results. I sat upright in my office chair. What kind of issue? A small pause. His sperm count is extremely low. I frowned slightly. Okay. Very low, she repeated gently. Low enough that natural conception would be highly unlikely. I stared out the glass walls of my office at downtown traffic below. That's fine, I said quickly. We'll do IVF or something. Another pause. Then came the sentence that changed everything. There's something else. Cold spread slowly through my chest. What? The morphology and motility results are concerning enough that I'd recommend repeating the analysis. Why? Silence. Then carefully. Because results like these are uncommon in men who've previously fathered children. My stomach dropped instantly. Trevor had a daughter from his first marriage, Lily. 10 years old, blonde curls, braces, soccer obsession. I adored that little girl. What are you saying? I whispered. I'm saying there's a possibility these fertility issues may have existed for a long time. The office around me suddenly felt too bright, too loud. That doesn't make sense, I said automatically. I understand this is difficult. No, she didn't understand yet, because my brain was already racing somewhere terrifying. Trevor and his ex-wife, Nicole, divorced 12 years earlier when Lily was a baby. According to Trevor, the marriage collapsed because Nicole cheated constantly and eventually left him emotionally destroyed. I'd heard the story 100 times. Trevor painted himself as the betrayed husband who stayed for the child until he couldn't survive the humiliation anymore. Everyone believed him, including me, especially me. Could stress cause this? I asked weakly. Stress alone wouldn't explain these numbers. I felt sick, not because Trevor might be infertile, because suddenly a horrifying possibility opened quietly in my mind, like a crack in ice. The doctor continued talking, but I barely heard the rest. Something about additional testing, genetic factors, follow-up appointments. I ended the call in a fog, then sat frozen at my desk for almost 20 minutes, staring at nothing. No, impossible. Trevor loved Lily, obsessively. Pictures in his wallet, weekend trips, daily FaceTimes. He cried at her school recitals. No man fakes that, right? I called him immediately. He answered cheerfully. Hey, babe. I swallowed hard. The doctor called. Silence instantly. And? I closed my office door slowly before speaking. She said your fertility results were concerning. A pause, then carefully. Concerning how? I repeated what the doctor told me. The silence afterward stretched too long, way too long. Trevor? He exhaled slowly. Maybe the lab messed something up. Maybe. But something in his voice felt strange now. Not surprised. Tight. Controlled. Like a man managing emotional fallout instead of experiencing it naturally. She said the results don't really make sense for someone who already has a child. Another silence. Then finally, what exactly are you asking me? That question chilled me instantly because I hadn't actually asked anything yet. I leaned back slowly in my office chair. I'm not asking anything. Good. Too fast. Too sharp. The room suddenly felt smaller. Trevor? I have a meeting, he interrupted quickly. We'll talk tonight. Then he hung up. I sat there staring at my phone while something cold and unfamiliar started spreading through my body. Fear. Not fear that my husband couldn't have children. Fear that he already knew. That night he came home unusually late. I was sitting at the kitchen island with 2 untouched glasses of wine and the fertility paperwork spread across the counter. Seattle rain hammered against the windows, while jazz played softly through the speakers Trevor always turned on when he wanted the house to feel peaceful. He walked in loosening his tie with practiced exhaustion. Traffic was insane. Lie. I knew immediately. After 9 years of marriage, you learn your spouse's lies by rhythm more than words. He kissed my forehead lightly and glanced at the paperwork. You've been reading all this? Yes. He sighed and poured himself bourbon instead of wine. Interesting. Trevor only drank bourbon when stressed. I watched him carefully. Do you think the results are wrong? He shrugged without meeting his eyes. Maybe. That's not really an answer. He took a sip. It's complicated. There it was. Complicated. Another word people use when truth threatens them. I folded my arms slowly. How complicated? He stared at the counter a moment before speaking. When Nicole got pregnant, the timing wasn't ideal. Every nerve in my body tightened instantly. What does that mean? He rubbed his jaw. It means our marriage was already bad. That's still not an answer. Another long silence. Then finally, he looked at me, and I swear I knew before he spoke. She cheated on me. The familiar story again, but this time it sounded rehearsed instead of painful. She admitted it? No. Then why are we talking about this? His expression hardened slightly. Because there were doubts. Doubts. Not certainty. Doubts. I stared at him across the kitchen island while my heartbeat turned uneven. You think Lily might not be yours. He looked away immediately, and that silence told me more than words ever could. Oh my God. It doesn't matter, he said quickly. She's my daughter. But you think there's a chance. She's been mine for 10 years. That's not what I asked. The room went dead quiet, except for rain. Finally, he whispered, yes. I physically sat down, because suddenly everything felt unstable. Not just our fertility issues, our entire marriage. You never told me this. I didn't want to reopen old wounds. No, I said quietly. You didn't want me questioning the story. His eyes snapped toward mine instantly. What's that supposed to mean? It meant something ugly was forming in my mind, something I didn't fully understand yet, because Trevor always talked about Nicole like a villain, cold, unfaithful, selfish. But now I was realizing something strange. In 9 years together, I had never once actually heard Nicole's version of the divorce. Not once. Trevor stepped closer carefully. Claire, did you ever do a paternity test? The question landed hard, too hard, because his face changed immediately. Not confusion, panic, tiny, fast. But there. No, he said. I stared at him. You're lying. His jaw tightened. Excuse me? You're lying. I would never. You already did. The room felt electric suddenly, dangerous. Trevor set the bourbon glass down too hard. You don't understand what that marriage was like. There it is again. What? That sentence. His eyes narrowed slightly. What sentence? You keep explaining emotions instead of facts. Silence. Then I asked quietly, did you do a paternity test? Another long pause. Finally, yes. My stomach dropped. And? He looked at the floor. The next sentence came so softly I almost didn't hear it. She's mine. Everything stopped. I blinked once, then twice. What? She's biologically mine. I stared at him in disbelief. Then why the hell are we even having this conversation? Trevor looked exhausted suddenly, older, cornered, because now we were standing somewhere deeper than fertility issues, somewhere uglier. "I don't know," he whispered. No, that wasn't true. He knew exactly why. And somewhere deep in my chest, I started realizing the fertility test wasn't the real thing breaking my marriage. It was what happened after. Because the second Trevor admitted he secretly tested his daughter's DNA years ago without telling anyone, I stopped seeing my husband the same way. I didn't sleep that night. Trevor didn't either. We lay on opposite sides of the bed like strangers who happened to be legally sharing a mortgage, listening to Seattle rain hit the windows in slow, patient waves. At some point around 3 a.m., he got up quietly and went downstairs. I didn't follow him. I just lay there staring at the ceiling, replaying his voice from earlier over and over. "She's mine." Not said with pride, not relief. Said like a man repeating a fact he'd spent years learning how to live with. That was the part I couldn't shake. Not the fertility results, not even the suspicion. It was the timeline. If he had done a paternity test years ago and never told Nicole, never told me, never told anyone, then what else had he been carrying alone? Morning came too fast. Gray light pressed through the curtains like the sky itself was exhausted. Trevor was already in the kitchen when I came down, fully dressed, coffee made, laptop open. Too normal. That was his thing. He always tried to normalize catastrophe. "Morning," he said carefully. I didn't answer right away. I just stood at the bottom of the stairs watching him like I was trying to match the version of him in my head with the version sitting at my kitchen island. "You didn't come back to bed," I said finally. He shrugged slightly. "Didn't want to wake you." Lie. We both knew it. I walked past him and poured coffee without looking at him. "Did you sleep?" "A little." Another lie. He'd been pacing downstairs all night. I could tell by the uneven creaks in the floorboards. I sat across him slowly. "So," I said, "we're just going to ignore what you said last night?" Trevor closed his laptop a little too slowly. I didn't say anything dramatic. I almost laughed. "That's your defense?" He exhaled. "Claire, it was a long time ago." 10 years is not a long time ago when you're talking about your child's DNA. His jaw tightened slightly. "She is my child." "You keep saying that like you're trying to convince yourself." That landed. I saw it in his face, a flicker of irritation, quickly buried. "I raised her," he said firmly. "Yes," I replied, "you did." Silence stretched between us. Coffee cooled in my hands. The house felt too still, like it was waiting for us to say the thing neither of us wanted to say out loud. Finally, I asked, "Did Nicole know you tested Lily?" A pause. Then, "No." That answer was almost worse than everything else, because it confirmed something deeper. Trevor wasn't just someone reacting to betrayal. He was someone who operated in secrecy when things hurt him enough. I leaned back slightly. "So you secretly questioned your daughter's paternity and never told your wife or your daughter or me?" He didn't deny it. That silence said everything. I looked down at my coffee. "You realize how insane that is, right?" I had reasons. There it is again. He frowned. "What?" "Reasons instead of accountability." His expression hardened. "You don't know what it was like back then." "I don't," I agreed, "because you never told me the truth. You told me a version that made you the victim in every scenario." Trevor stood up abruptly. "I was the victim." The sudden volume made me flinch slightly. Then I saw it. Not anger at me. Fear. Deep, buried fear. Not of losing me. Of something else. Of being understood too clearly. I stood too, slowly. "Were you?" He rubbed his forehead. "You're making this something it's not." "No," I said quietly. "I think I'm finally seeing what it is." He looked at me sharply. "And what is it?" I hesitated, because I didn't have the full shape of it yet, only fragments, a pattern I didn't like. "You don't trust people when you feel threatened," I said carefully. "That's not true. You tested your own daughter behind everyone's back." His face tightened. "That was different.
How?
Because I needed to know. My voice lowered. Know what? Silence. Then, barely audible, the truth. Something cold moved through me. Because suddenly I realized Trevor didn't see that act as betrayal. He saw it as necessity. A man justifying secrecy as protection. I stepped closer slightly. And what did the truth change for you? His eyes flicked away. Nothing. Lie. I knew it instantly. Because people don't secretly test DNA for nothing. That kind of action changes a person, whether they admit it or not. I watched him carefully. Did you ever consider telling Nicole? No. Why not? A long pause. Then, because it would have destroyed everything. That sentence hung in the air. Everything. Not just the marriage. His identity. His certainty. The life he built around being the betrayed husband. I felt something shift in my chest. Slow. Uneasy. Because I was starting to see the edges of a story I hadn't known I was already inside. Trevor, I said quietly. What aren't you telling me? His eyes snapped to mine instantly. Too fast. Too sharp. Nothing. That was the moment I knew there was more. Not suspicion anymore. Something closer to certainty. Because lies usually come with anger or avoidance. But this was controlled panic. The kind of response people have when they're standing near something that could collapse their entire reality. I reached for my phone slowly. What are you doing? He asked immediately. Calling Nicole. That stopped him cold. No. I looked up at him. Why not? His breathing changed slightly. Because it's unnecessary. No, I said softly. It's just inconvenient for you. His jaw tightened. Claire, don't do that. Do what? Turn this into something ugly. I almost laughed again. Something ugly. As if we weren't already standing inside something ugly. I held his gaze. You already did that when you tested your daughter's DNA and lied about it for years. Silence. Then, quietly, you're not going to call her. It wasn't a request. It wasn't even anger. It was certainty. That's what made it dangerous. I looked at him for a long moment, then pressed call anyway. Trevor moved instantly. Fast enough that I barely registered it before my phone was snatched out of my hand. He turned his back, breathing hard, gripping it like it might explode. Trevor, I said slowly. Give it back. He didn't respond, just stared at the screen like it was a threat. And in that moment, watching my husband stand in my kitchen holding my phone like it contained something he couldn't afford to let escape, I understood something I wasn't ready to understand. The fertility test didn't break my marriage. The DNA test didn't reveal the truth. They were both symptoms, not the cause. And whatever Trevor was hiding behind all of this was still very much alive. Trevor didn't give my phone back. Not right away. He just stood there in the middle of the kitchen holding it like it weighed more than it should. Like it had suddenly turned into something dangerous in his hands. Outside, Seattle rain tapped against the windows in a steady rhythm. The kind of sound that normally feels calming. That morning, it just felt like pressure. I said, give it back. I repeated. Slower this time. He didn't move. His eyes were still locked on the screen like he was reading something that wasn't there anymore. Trevor, I said again. Sharper now. That finally broke him out of it. He looked up at me, and for the first time since I'd known him, I didn't recognize what I saw in his expression. It wasn't anger, not fear exactly either. It was calculation, like his mind had stopped reacting emotionally and started building exits. "You shouldn't call her," he said quietly. "That's not your decision. It is when you don't understand what you're doing." I laughed once, short and disbelieving. There it is again. You talking like I'm missing context instead of just, the truth. His jaw tightened. Nicole is not stable. That sentence landed differently. Not new information, not shocking, strategic. Like he was placing it on the table as a shield. I stepped closer. "You always do that," I said quietly. "Whenever something corners you, you turn the other person into the problem." "I'm not doing that." "Yes, you are." He exhaled through his nose, controlled. "Calling her will only make things worse." "For who?" Silence. That's silence again. The same pattern. I pointed at the phone in his hand. "You tested your daughter's DNA without telling anyone. You've been sitting on that for years. You never told your ex-wife. You never told me. And now suddenly you're worried about making things worse?" His grip tightened slightly. "That was private." My head tilted a little. "That was your daughter's life." His eyes flicked away for half a second. Not denial, discomfort. That tiny hesitation told me more than anything he'd said all morning. I took another step closer. "Give me the phone." "No." That was immediate, clean, final. The way people respond when they're protecting something they've already decided you can't see. I felt my stomach drop slightly, because this wasn't about embarrassment anymore. This was control. "Trevor," I said slowly, "what are you afraid she's going to tell me?" He didn't answer, but something in his face shifted, just a fraction. Enough. And suddenly my brain did something I didn't expect. It connected a pattern I hadn't been able to name yet. The secrecy around Lily's test, the way he avoided talking about Nicole directly, the controlled story he always told about their marriage, the way he never allowed nuance into it, only certainty. He was the victim, she was the villain. End of discussion. Except now there were cracks. I stared at him. "You didn't just test her," I said quietly. His eyes snapped back to mine instantly. Too fast again. That confirmed it. "There's more," I said. "No." But his voice was tighter now. I stepped closer, until there was almost no space between us. "What did you find?" Silence. Long enough to feel intentional. Then, finally, he said, "Nothing that matters anymore." That answer was worse than a confession, because it meant there was something. I shook my head slightly. "You don't get to decide that." "I do when it affects my daughter." "She's not just your daughter, Trevor." His expression changed slightly at that. A flicker of irritation. Not because I was wrong, because I was widening the circle. He turned away a little, still holding my phone. "I'm not doing this with you." "You already are doing it." He let out a slow breath. "You don't know what Nicole is like." I almost smiled at that, because I had heard it so many times it had become background noise in our marriage. Nicole is unstable. Nicole is emotional. Nicole is unpredictable. Nicole is the reason everything fell apart. I folded my arms. "You've said that for years. Because it's true? Is it?" I asked softly. That question finally hit something. I saw it in his face. A shift, like his mind briefly slipped off the script. Then he recovered quickly. "Yes." But it came out less certain. I nodded slowly. "Okay." That made him suspicious. He narrowed his eyes slightly. "Okay." I held his gaze. "Then call her yourself." He hesitated, just a second too long. That hesitation told me everything I needed, because if Nicole really was the unstable one, if she really was the threat, if she really was the chaos he claimed, he wouldn't hesitate. He'd already have called her himself to control the narrative. Instead, he was standing in my kitchen, blocking my access to her, managing the situation, containing it, like a man standing in front of a door he didn't want opened. I reached for my phone again. He moved immediately. "Stop." This time his voice sharpened. Not loud, controlled, dangerous in a quieter way. I stopped, looked at him. "Give it back," I said again. He didn't. Instead, he said something that shifted the entire room. "If you talk to Nicole, you're going to hear things you can't unhear." Silence hit instantly. The rain outside suddenly felt louder. I stared at him. "What things?" He looked away again. That avoidance was louder than any answer. I stepped back slowly. "Trevor, what did you do?" His jaw clenched. I didn't do anything, but there was no conviction in it now, just repetition. I studied him carefully, and for the first time I saw something underneath all the polished husband layers. Not just guilt, not just fear, something closer to containment, like he had spent years holding a version of his past in place with his bare hands and was terrified that loosening his grip even slightly would collapse everything. I exhaled slowly. Give me my phone. No, that was immediate again, but this time something inside me shifted. Not anger, clarity, because now I understood what this wasn't. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't confusion. This was protection. From what, I still didn't fully know. But Trevor wasn't guarding feelings. He was guarding information. I looked at him quietly. You're not scared of Nicole, I said. He blinked once. I never said I was. You don't have to. Silence. Then I added softly, you're scared of what she can prove. That landed. I saw it. Not visibly dramatic, just a subtle tightening in his posture, a reaction he didn't fully control. And in that moment, something cold settled in my chest, because I realized I was no longer looking at a man reacting to stress. I was looking at a man managing exposure. Trevor finally lowered the phone slightly, not giving it back, but not holding it like a weapon anymore either. Just holding it. We stood there in the kitchen while Seattle rain continued outside, both of us very aware that whatever came next was no longer about fertility or marriage problems or misunderstandings. It was about truth. And the problem with truth is, once it starts surfacing, it doesn't stop where you want it to. It keeps going, until it hits everything.